The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
We've almost totally stopped it by sea. Now we'll stop it by land.
President Trump reveals a potential escalation in his drug cartel crackdown following a series of lethal boat strikes.
Violent crimes against children arrests alone are up 10%. Gang arrests are up 210% in the last 7 months alone.
Cracking open Operation Summer Heat, the president's crime cleanup agenda broken down by the numbers.
I will, however, be a mayor who's ready to speak at any time to lower the cost of living.
As Election Day inches closer, New York City Democratic mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani doubling down on his policies. We talk with a U.S. representative about how she sees his pitch to voters. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for being here. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin on this weekend edition with a look at the big headlines of the week and a look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. The government shutdown now on track to be one of the longest in our nation's history. Former Trump advisor John Bolton is indicted for allegedly mishandling classified documents. Trade tensions between China and the U.S. continue to rise, and economists project a grim outlook for consumer spending during the holiday season. But first, President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met at the White House on Friday. The discussion was over long-range weapons they hope will pressure Russia to end its invasion. The discussion comes ahead of high-level meetings between U.S. and Russian officials. Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are also going to meet in Hungary the coming weeks. Zelensky praising Trump's peace efforts and says his ceasefire deal in Gaza provides momentum for him to strike a deal between Russia and Ukraine. The White House says we should expect to see more attacks on Venezuelan boats, which it says have been carrying illegal drugs to the U.S. The National News Desk, Christine Frizzell, brings us the response from Venezuela.
For months, U.S. troops and military ships have been making their way to the Caribbean, with growing signs it could mean an impending war with Venezuela in the name of stopping drugs from getting to U.S. shores.
We've almost totally stopped it by sea. Now we'll stop it by land.
President Trump Wednesday confirming this report in the New York Times that he authorized covert CIA action inside Venezuela.
I authorized for 2 reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. We have a lot of drugs coming in from Venezuela, and a lot of the Venezuelan drugs come in through the sea.
One reason why President Trump says he also gave the green light to yet another strike on a boat he says was carrying drugs.
The president is taking these unprecedented steps, and it's making a real impact. We are seeing less boats with lots of drugs coming into the shores of the United States of America as a result of these successful strikes.
Others on Capitol Hill, though, calling for hearings, insisting the White House must legally provide more evidence there are actually drugs on board these boats.
I was a CIA officer and helped with targeting. I have no problem going after these cartels, but we've never had an instance where there's a secret list of what I understand to be dozens of now terrorist organizations that the American public and certainly the oversight committees don't get to know.
The Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro comparing Trump's actions to failed attempts at regime change in places like Afghanistan and Argentina.
Not war, just peace.
Also saying no to coups carried out by the CIA.
How long will CIA coups continue? Latin America does not want them, does not need them, and repudiates them.
Meanwhile, in the United States, the White House immigration crackdown has continued, including in cities like Washington, D.C. and Chicago. This week, the Department of Homeland Security said Mexican cartels had put bounties on the heads of ICE and CBP officers, including $5,000 to $10,000 for kidnappings and $50,000 to kill them. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
President Trump says he might go to the Supreme Court next month to hear oral arguments on the major tariffs case that could determine the fate of his trade agenda. If he goes, Trump would be the first sitting U.S. president to attend Supreme Court arguments, which are scheduled for November 5th. The justices will review Trump's request to overturn a lower court ruling, which found that a president does not have authority to impose country-specific tariffs. The Supreme Court's conservative majority signals it could reconsider a key portion of the Voting Rights Act designed to prevent racial discrimination in redistricting. Justices heard oral arguments Wednesday in a case centered on Louisiana's congressional map. The court's ruling could pave the way for other Republican state legislatures to redraw their maps to pick up more red seats. A ruling is expected by the end of June. President Trump and FBI Director Kash Patel held a joint press conference in the Oval Office Wednesday, the two touting federal law enforcement's efforts to combat crime in major cities across the U.S. while also revealing which city could be next. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, has more.
One of the biggest stats shared in the Oval Office Wednesday was that since taking office back in January, 23,000 violent criminals have been arrested. But both President Trump and FBI Director Kash Patel diving deeper into firearms, drugs, and also gangs. In a busy Wednesday afternoon in the Oval Office, Patel touting the success of the FBI since President Trump reclaimed the White House, including tracking down and capturing 4 of its 10 most wanted fugitives.
This includes a lady who murdered her 6-year-old handicapped child and fled to India. We got her in 2 months.
President Trump sharing that in the same time period, the FBI has arrested at least 23,000 violent criminals, more than double during former President Biden's last year in office.
Honestly, we haven't really even gotten going yet.
Some of the other numbers shared: the FBI destroyed or disrupted 170 organized criminal enterprises, including 1,600 of the most violent gangs, while also confiscating 6,000 illegal guns. Meanwhile, the ATF removing over 25,000 guns.
Men and women of law enforcement say 2 things to me repeatedly. First, you have taken the handcuffs off them and let them do their jobs, and you let cops be cops.
Patel taking the time Wednesday to highlight Operation Summer Heat, a 3-month FBI initiative from June to September combating violent crime in several major U.S. cities. The results: over 8,700 arrests, 2,200 gun seizures, 421 grams of fentanyl seized, over 550 missing children located, with so far 2,100 indictments.
That in and of itself would be historic for a 4-year presidency. You did that in 7 months because you let good cops be cops.
Trump also revealing during the press conference which city the administration could be targeting next in its crime crackdown.
That you start looking at San Francisco. I think we can make San Francisco. There's one of our great cities 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and now it's a mess.
Now, aside from San Francisco, Trump recently saying Baltimore and Boston could be next. The president this week even threatening to relocate next year's World Cup matches scheduled to be played in suburban Boston. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
Chinese officials believe they have found President Trump's weakest points in trade negotiations: the stock market. According to the Wall Street Journal, citing people with knowledge of the talks, Beijing is taking more aggressive actions because it's betting the U.S. can't absorb a prolonged trade conflict. Chinese officials, meantime, believe such a move would tank markets. For example, amid news of renewed trade tensions between the two nations, the stock market had a volatile week. The markets had seen both massive losses and gains as market watchers see the prospect of a trade war as the reason for global market uncertainty. Additionally, recent reports show that the wider U.S. economy is becoming very dependent on the wealthy who own assets in real estate or stocks. The president giving a stark warning to Hamas that if they continue to strike Gaza, quote, "we will have no choice but to go in and kill them," he said in a Truth Social post. This as he tries to maintain the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Hamas said it has handed over all the remains of Israeli hostages that it can access. They said that more effort and special equipment is needed to recover the remaining bodies. Israel says Hamas has access to at least 6 other bodies. That's according to CNN. The Justice Department has charged a senior advisor at the State Department for allegedly removing and storing hundreds of classified documents at his Northern Virginia home. Court documents show on September 12th, Ashley Tellis had a co-worker at a government facility print classified documents for him. On September 25th, he printed U.S. Air Force documents showing aircraft capabilities. Federal prosecutors say he has met with Chinese government officials multiple times over the past several years. If convicted, convicted. Tellis faces up to 10 years in prison. And the Federal Reserve is likely to cut its key interest rate twice more this year. A signal from Chair Jerome Powell this week, who said a sharp slowdown in hiring across the country poses a growing risk to the U.S. economy.
If we move too quickly, then we may leave the inflation job unfinished and have to come back later and finish it. And if we move too slowly, there may be unnecessary losses, painful losses in the employment market. So we're in the difficult situation of balancing those two things.
Lower rates could translate to lower borrowing costs for mortgages, car, and business loans. CEOs see stagflation on the horizon in the next few years. That's according to a poll of executives by nonpartisan think tank, the Conference Board. About 2/3 expect the unemployment rate and inflation rate to accelerate. Confidence dipped to 48. Anything below 50, by the way, reflects more negative than positive reactions. This as the Federal Reserve is split over rate cuts.
Policy last year was less tight than I think a lot of people thought it was, which meant that cutting rates last year was a mistake. And by the same logic, this year, I think the policy is more tight than a lot of people think it is, which means that cutting rates is actually the right thing to do.
The survey and confusion around monetary policy is a sign of an uncertain business environment. Coming up next here on the National News Desk, Meta Makeover, how every teen's Instagram will now look more like a PG-13 film. Also, U.S. Representative Claudia Tenney gives her thoughts on the New York City mayoral race and the state of New York politics. We'll be right back. To the New York City mayoral race and the Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani. New York Representative Claudia Tenney joined me earlier this week to discuss.
Well, I'm looking to make this a city that every person chooses, whether they're a business leader or they're someone who works for that business. And the key ways of doing that are actually delivering quality of life, public safety, and affordability for each and every person.
You just heard Zohran Mamdani there making his pitch for New York City Mayor. Republican Representative of New York, Claudia Tenney, joining us to discuss. We appreciate you joining us tonight on the National News Desk. First of all, the Mamdani campaign indicates they want to do what is best to help the people of New York City. You just heard. Obviously, you see it a bit differently, though.
Well, everybody wants to do what's best for New York City. It's how you get there. And communism is a failed solution. It's not the case. I've lived in a communist country. And he sounds like a snake oil salesman. He couldn't answer a single question from what I heard watching parts of the interview with Martha McCallum on Fox News. He tells people what he thinks they want to hear.
The president just yesterday, though, threatened to withhold federal funding if this race goes to Mamdani. So first, I just want to play part of those statements.
And I'm very generous, and I was always very generous with New York, even when you had opposition there, but I was always very generous. But I wouldn't be generous to a communist, a guy that's going to take the money and throw it out the window, because you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. And we're not going to let somebody get into office and squander the taxpayer money from this country. We're not going to let it happen.
So you heard the comments, Representative, earlier today, Mamdani, during that interview, speaking, a lot about taxpayers and how this is going to affect the American taxpayer. Do you think the voters, though, of New York are clearly aware of the president's intentions and what could be the impact to voters of your state if Trump does withhold that money?
I think the taxpayers should be more afraid of a communist who wants to go in and double and triple taxes, try to turn a capitalist system, the United States' largest city and the most important economic city when it comes to New York State, and to turn it around into a communist, hellhole. You're going to have people leaving the city in droves, not paying taxes. Taxes are going to go up. Resources are going to go down. What Trump's saying is don't continue to put in these communist policies in place.
Representative, before I let you go, I'm curious if you think New York is representative of something greater nationwide. You and AOC, I mentioned, are part of the same New York delegation, but what can you say about the so-called squad of which she is part and the spread of progressive politics nationwide as we are looking at more and more races? This movement is clearly picking up steam.
Well, she isn't a progressive. She's a democratic socialist, which means they derived their ideology from Marxism. That's what she is. And they have steam in some areas, but President Trump won pretty decisively last year, winning all 7 swing states and doing much better than he even did in his first term in terms of the electoral vote. But they're picking up in certain enclaves, certain cities, but you're seeing what's happening in those cities. They're struggling. They're losing population. People are moving, to red states because they want to see their taxes lower. They want to see, borders secure. They want to see safe streets. They want to see their children be able to, go to school without fear of crime. And these are the things that people are looking for. They also just want common sense. And you're not going to get common sense out of AOC. She's very similar to Mondami in a way, though. She's very charming, which, he seems to have charisma as well. But they are snake oil salesmen. They are not selling anything that works.
A lot of important topics discussed with you. I'm sure that they will certainly come up tomorrow for the mayoral debate. Representative Claudia Tenney, thank you for joining us tonight on the National News Desk. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much.
In your money, the Social Security Administration delayed this week's cost of living increase announcement due to the government shutdown. Cost of living adjustment based on inflation each year. AARP and the Senior Citizen League predict an increase of roughly 2.7%. The announcement is postponed to October 24th. Also, teens on Instagram will now only be able to see PG-13 content, and they can't change their settings without a parent's permission. Meta says the teen-specific accounts won't be able to see posts with sex, drugs, dangerous stunts, or content encouraging harmful behavior. And Instagram may even hide some posts. Anyone under 18 automatically gets a teen account unless a parent lets them opt out. Families are suing popular gaming platform Roblox, calling the platform a breeding ground for predators. One father of 2, Steven, says his son was targeted by an alleged sex offender posing as a 16-year-old. In a statement, Roblox pushing back against the claims, citing its chat safety rules. Well, there has been a lot of debate over whether it's actually cheaper to drive an electric vehicle compared to a gas-powered car. So what's the bottom line? Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. Yeah, this continues to be a debate every way you look at it. But in the long run, is electric still cheaper, as many have long said?
So in most cases, yes. It's cheaper to drive EV, especially over time. According to the Natural Resources Defense Council and data from Cox Automotive, EV prices have dropped quite a bit, about $14,000 in just a year, bringing the average cost to just $2,800, a little bit more than a new gas car. But if you can't charge it at home, it might not make sense depending on where you live. So according to CostPay, the U.S. averages 104 gas pumps per 1,000 road miles compared to 22.
That's an important consideration, though.
Yeah.
Is your accessibility to these charging stations.
Right.
So even though the sticker price though is a little bit higher, it sounds like you make it up later.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, New York Times analysis, they said it shows that driving 100 miles in a typical gas car costs around $13, while charging an EV at home costs about $5. That's more than half, obviously, the price to fill up. EV maintenance also is a lot cheaper. EVs don't need oil changes or spark plug replacements, and regenerative braking helps save on those brake pads. So on average, EV maintenance runs about 40% cheaper per mile than gas vehicles do.
All right, Emma, thank you.
Thank you.
Later on, Emma will join us to explain how government incentives have swayed the cost war between electric vehicles and gas-powered cars. Artists recreated a Christopher Columbus statue destroyed by rioters in 2020. Why he's now headed to the White House. And Jewish and Palestinian Americans react to this week's historic peace deal in Gaza. We'll be right back. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Washington, where local Jewish and Palestinian people react to the Gaza peace deal.
For Jewish people in the Seattle area, the return of the hostages gives them a chance to finally see an end to more than 700 days of captivity that they were slowly counting down.
And I think it feels like today represents the start of turning a page to the next chapter of what has been a horrific last 2 years.
For local Palestinians, they say their people don't have to watch for bullets and bombs cutting them down at every turn. But so much of Gaza is now in ruins, and starvation is a daily struggle for so many of the survivors.
There is a sense of relief that we don't have to watch in horror and helplessness as we're seeing our families and friends and our people back home being slaughtered.
Alexandria Colonial Tours' Jimmy Merritt doesn't worry about getting his steps in.
We tell you all of the haunted hotspots. Then at the end of the tour, we abandon you in a graveyard.
I asked Jimmy to reveal some of Old Town's dark and hidden histories for 7 News.
We see so many people walk into this store, but they don't always know kind of both how old the building is and the haunted history behind
A
it.
soon-to-be bride burned to death when her oil lamp catches her robes on fire.
And ever since then, she has continued to haunt and lurk about the building. So this is the Carlisle House, one of the oldest buildings in Alexandria.
A mummified cat found during renovations in the 70s.
And what makes that so macabre is it was clearly put there on purpose.
A Christopher Columbus statue that used to stand in Baltimore's Little Italy is now revitalized and headed to the White House. Rioters tore it down in 2020 and tossed it into the Inner Harbor, a scene that struck a nerve with artist and fisherman Tillman Hemsley.
It just irritated me so badly that I said, don't worry, I'll get that back up.
Hemsley reeled in the sculpture fragments from the water and sent them to his art studio. He and his son used 3D scans to make a mold and then a precise replica. Still, ongoing controversy kept the resurrected explorer stored for several years. But last week, the Trump administration gave the Hemsleys an unexpected call. The statue is expected to arrive at the White House within a couple of weeks. Coming up next here, gold and silver see a spike in value. Why prices for the precious metals are soaring globally. And major rebrand. Why America's most popular potato chip is not only changing its packaging, but its recipes as well. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. President Trump announces a new federal initiative to make fertility treatments cheaper. The plan also includes incentives for drug makers to expand production in the United States. In Alaska, a massive airlift is underway after the remnants of Typhoon Halong slammed the state's western coast this week. Hundreds of people were evacuated in what the National Guard calls one of its largest airlift operations in recent history. And Lay's announces what it's calling its biggest rebrand in its nearly 100-year history. The company added it's removing artificial flavors and colors from its core products in the U.S. by the end of the year. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Gold is hopping right now, but so are silver prices. One reason for silver's bull market is a squeeze in supply of the precious metal. It's pushed it to a 70% gain on the London market. That's compared to a 55% increase for gold. Both are seeing a surge in interest by investors who are looking beyond U.S. Treasuries for safe haven assets. President Trump's tariffs and political turbulence driving economic fears and pushing the metals even higher. CVS bought prescription files from hundreds of closed Rite Aid and drugstores and is now running 63 of its locations. The company says it is operating former Rite Aids in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. The chain reportedly transferred over 600 files from pharmacies in 15 states to nearby CVS locations. Rite Aid announced on its website that it closed all of its remaining businesses after filing for bankruptcy. Netflix is getting into podcasting. The streaming giant is partnering with Spotify to bring 16 podcasts to its platforms across sports, culture, lifestyle, and true crime. The initial lineup of shows is produced by Spotify Studios and The Ringer. It's the podcasting network the audio company acquired. Subscribers can start to watch the podcast in the U.S. early next year. Coming up for the first time in years in the U.S., New York health officials confirm a locally acquired case of a mosquito-borne virus. You are watching the National News Desk, America's News now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
What we're hearing from them is that they're concerned about the economy.
Economists giving a grim outlook for the holiday season, what shoppers need to know.
I think he's, a bad person. I think he's a bad guy. Yeah, he's a bad guy. It's too bad, but it's the way it goes.
A third critic of the president indicted. The charges former National Security Advisor John Bolton faces, plus a growing antibiotic crisis. The new warning of drug-resistant superbugs spreading and the threat it poses on your health. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we are now getting a fresh snapshot of what the holiday shopping season will bring. As the National News Desk, Atra El-Nashar explains, the uncertainty of inflation and the health of the economy is already taking its toll.
'Tis the season for Americans tightening their belts. The holiday shopping season isn't far off, and this year, U.S. consumers are cutting back, planning to spend an average of $1,595. That's down 10% from last year, according to a Deloitte survey out Wednesday.
What we're hearing from them is that they're concerned about the economy, and they're also taking stock of their own financial situations.
The projected drop this holiday season includes a 14% decline in spending on goods and a 6% decline for experiences. Perhaps preparing for tighter times, as 77% of consumers expect higher prices on holiday items, and 57% think the economy will weaken in 2026.
That's the highest level we've seen since 1997, so I think it speaks to the fact that people are a little bit anxious right now.
If you ask economists, they see a mixed bag. In a new survey by the Wall Street Journal, taken before the recent escalation in trade tensions with China, experts saw overall economic growth rising at a faster rate than previously expected, now up to 1.7% in the fourth quarter. But their expectations for the job market have gotten worse, now expecting the unemployment rate to rise and hover around 4.5% over the next year as job creation quickly loses steam. The latest curveball from China has injected a hefty dose of uncertainty in America's economy and economies around the world. Strict export controls on rare earth minerals and all products containing those minerals, like semiconductors.
This will impact artificial intelligence systems and high-tech products, but even regular consumer items like cars, smartphones, and potentially even household appliances could be affected.
President Trump responding with an additional 100% tariff on Chinese goods coming into the U.S. starting November 1st. And that's on top of the more than 50% tariffs in place now. So far, tariffs have had a smaller than expected impact on inflation, but a massive escalation like this with the world's largest exporter could change that. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
John Bolton pleads not guilty to all 18 charges against him. The former National Security Advisor for President Trump appeared in federal court for his arraignment Friday. He's accused of emailing classified information to his family and keeping top secret documents at his Maryland home. Bolton worked for Trump in his first term. Trump fired him in 2019 over foreign policy disagreements. If convicted, Bolton faces a maximum 10 years in prison. New information on the Chicago man prosecutors say solicited the killing of a high-ranking U.S. Border Patrol commander. A criminal complaint says he sent messages reading $2,000 for information and $10K if you take him down. Though his attorney says he is innocent, Border Czar Tom Homan blasted violence against federal agents on Fox.
I've worked for 7 different administrations, Harris, 7. Wow. And I've never seen anything even close to this, the hateful rhetoric that has caused over 1,000% increase in ICE officers. Chief Bovino, a good friend of mine, he's doing a terrific job. He hasn't been home in months, going from city to city and helping run these operations. But the hateful rhetoric has to stop. I said back in March, if the hateful rhetoric continues, there will be bloodshed. People are going to die.
The Department of Homeland Security says there is credible intelligence that members of Mexican drug cartels are offering a tiered bounty system for hits on ICE agents and federal officers. $2,000 for information to dox agents or their family members. Look at the numbers. $5,000 to $10,000 for kidnapping or other non-deadly assaults, and up to $50,000 for the assassination. Developing now, Senator Maria Cantwell is asking the Office of the Special Counsel to investigate Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem for possibly violating the Hatch Act. Last week, a video of Noem blaming Democrats for the government shutdown began airing at TSA checkpoints. In a letter, Cantwell claims the video is a partisan message and that reports indicate taxpayer dollars are being used to air it. DHS has not commented. For the first time ever, the United States has dropped out of world's most powerful passport top 10 list. The U.S. now holds the number 12 spot in the Henley rankings after holding the top spot about a decade ago. 3 Asian passports now command the top of the leaderboard. Singapore boasts visa-free access to 193 destinations worldwide, followed by South Korea and Japan. President Trump's trade war has netted a major victory over the Canadian auto industry. Carmaker Stellantis is set to invest $13 billion to grow its U.S. market and manufacturing. According to the company, the money would be invested over the next 4 years and would help bring more than 5,000 jobs to plants in Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. The company says the money will boost U.S. vehicle production 50% over current levels. We are closing in on 3 weeks full since the government shutdown. Neither Democrats nor Republicans' positions have changed, meaning there's no end in sight.
So House and Senate Democrats are going to continue to hold firm as it relates to a basic common sense position that when we enact spending bills, we should be helping the American people, not hurting them.
Democrats claim Republicans have gone radio silent and are just vacationing instead of working on a solution. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says his party remains united in their demands for an extension of health care tax credits to reopen the government. Republicans maintain the subsidies were always a discussion for later this year. They blame Democrats for continuing to vote down their short-term funding bill.
It is so difficult to be a happy warrior when you know that so many millions of American people are suffering, being made to suffer unnecessarily because of the Democrats' political games.
If the shutdown continues through Monday, it will be the 3rd longest in modern history. There is now a surge in drug-resistant bacterial infections, according to the World Health Organization. And a report looked at resistance rates across 22 antibiotics used to treat infections of the urinary and gastrointestinal tracts, the bloodstream, and gonorrhea. It found between 2018 and 2023, resistance rose in more than 40% of the monitored antibiotics. In 2023, 1 in 6 infections were resistant. The WHO Director General calling for antibiotics to be used responsibly and urging access to medicines, diagnostics, and vaccines. A major shakeup could be coming to the Internal Revenue Service, giving the White House more control over who the agency investigates. According to multiple officials, the new leadership already has a list of potential investigative targets, including major Democratic donors like billionaire George Soros and his affiliated organizations. As national correspondent Kayla Gaskins explains, it is raising concerns. The changes will open the door to politically motivated probes.
This plan coincides with a broader White House initiative to scrutinize left-leaning groups that President Trump claims are funding political unrest in Democratic-led cities. The FBI, DHS, Justice Department, and the IRS are now tasked with tracing the financial networks funding what the White House has labeled domestic terror networks. According to the White House, these groups include nonprofits and educational institutions.
In a lot of instances, when you're talking about these activist groups, you're talking about nonprofit organizations that have tax-exempt status. They're oftentimes given money by large grant-giving foundations.
Billionaire activist donor George Soros is perhaps the biggest fish the White House is after. Soros has long backed progressive candidates and policies through his Open Society Foundation. Critics argue his donations also fund violent leftist protests and civil unrest. The Justice Department is urging investigations into Soros' foundations. President Trump has already said George Soros and his son Alex should face federal criminal charges under the RICO Act. President Trump says he's also targeting other left-wing organizations, including Antifa.
But they have been very threatening to people, but we're going to be very threatening to them, far more threatening to them than they ever were with us, and that includes the people that fund them. So we're going to be looking very strongly at the people that are funding these operations.
According to IRS officials, as of now, no formal criminal investigations have been launched from the leadership shakeup. Talking about your money, the automotive industry is another place Americans are seeing what is called a K-shaped economy, where gaps widen between the wealthy and everyone else. For the first time ever, the average price for a new vehicle is now about $50,000, according to the Cox Automotive's Kelley Blue Book new report. While auto loan delinquency rates are rising for those with low credit ratings, this shows those who can afford it are scooping up cars, and those who can't are staying out of the market entirely. With gas prices still bouncing around and federal EV tax credits ending, many are wondering, is going electric still worth it financially? Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. So I know there are a lot of variables here, Emma. Yeah. What did you find out?
So the answer is really kind of depending on how long you plan to keep the car. So even though federal tax credits are being phased out this year, the NRDC backed Atlas Public Policy, a study, and that all found that EVs are actually still cheaper to own in 4 out of 5 vehicle categories when you look at the total lifetime costs.
And I mean, of course, everyone's different, right? When you account for where and how you drive, what kind of costs are we looking at?
So the financial edge really depends on where you live, how you drive, and also how you charge your car. So the math can look different for pretty much anybody. The New York Times reports that a typical EV costs about $5 to drive 100 miles compared to $13 in a gas car. And the gap's even wider in states like Washington and Oregon, where cheap electricity meets expensive gas.
So it's not all savings. Location is still a big influence.
Yeah, location seems like one of the biggest influences. I mean, if you live somewhere with high electricity prices like California or Connecticut, that gap can shrink or even reverse the cost savings. And if you can't charge your car at home and rely on those fast chargers, the cost can really exceed when you pay what you would pay at the gas pump. That's all according to CostPay. They found that the U.S. averages 104 gas pumps per 1,000 road miles compared to 22 EV charging ports.
All right, Emma, well, if you're in the market looking for a new car, this is helpful information. You can check it out online. For more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to Emma's sources, scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com. So to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from covert operations in Venezuela to the growing concern over the state of the economy.
And welcome back to the National News Desk. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. President Trump announcing this week that a covert CIA operation is taking place in Venezuela to help stem the smuggling of illegal drugs into the U.S. National correspondent Christine Frizzau, this seems like quite an escalation in an operation that to date has involved striking suspected drug smuggling boats in open waters.
Yeah, last week, Steve, we saw the president make public these secret plans that he authorized, that he's conducting these operations on the ground in Venezuela. Now, on one hand, it's not super surprising. On another, it's something presidents don't usually confirm out of concern for hampering the action. According to the White House, all of these operations concerning Venezuela are about cracking down on illegal drugs getting into the United States. But there's been a pretty hefty military buildup in the Caribbean, not just ships, but lots of service members as well. One more operation that appears to be expanding, these attacks that we've seen on boats, the White House says are trafficking drugs to the United States.
The president is taking these unprecedented steps, and it's making a real impact. We are seeing less boats with lots of drugs coming into the shores of the United States of America as a result of these successful strikes, and I think the American people can expect them to continue.
Now, on Capitol Hill, there are certainly many people who support these actions, but there are also growing calls for hearings. We've heard from both Democrats and Republicans the problematic nature of literally blowing people up instead of arresting them and giving them a trial. We've heard calls for the White House to prove that there are indeed drugs on these boats, and a lot of questions raised about the War Powers Act. Congress does not appear to be consulted at all ahead of these operations, Steve.
National correspondent Christine Frizzau, thank you. Meanwhile, mixed messages as the economy continues growing, but prices and unemployment are going in the wrong direction. National correspondent Atra Elnishar, you reported this week on an economic forecast with some staggering figures.
Yeah, Steve, look, I know it's only October, but believe it or not, holiday shopping is starting soon. And we're looking at some new data out from Deloitte that shows American consumers this season are planning to cut back in a major way, planning to spend on average just under $1,600 per person. That is a 10% decline from last year. I don't remember the last time I saw a retail forecast with a decline that wasn't even in line with inflation. And this decline includes a 14% drop in plans to spend on goods, on durable goods like gifts, and a 6% drop in spending on experiences, something that Americans have really held on to since the pandemic. So this is possibly a sign that that is fading. So take a listen to what one of Deloitte's leaders in retail research told me. Her name is Lupin Skelly. Take a listen.
When we ask people, hey, with the next 6 months, how are you expecting the economy to fare? We had 57% expecting it to get worse. And that's the highest level we've seen since 1997.
1997, that's pretty tough. There's been a couple recessions in there since then. And also 77% expect higher prices on holiday items. Now, if you're asking economists how they feel about the economy, it's something of a mixed bag. The Wall Street Journal put out a really comprehensive survey of economists. Now, granted, this was taken before the recent escalations in trade tensions with China, but economists generally are improving their outlook on overall economic growth, GDP, but they're lowering their expectations for the job market. As we've been reporting, hiring is really losing steam. Last month, according to ADP, the economy lost about 32,000 jobs.
National correspondents Atra Elnishar, Christine Frizzau, great reporting as always. Thank you for your hard work. Back to you.
Now to a health alert. New York health officials have confirmed the first locally acquired case of the mosquito-borne illness, chikungunya virus. The person living on Long Island, I should say, started experiencing symptoms in August, and it is unclear how they contracted the virus, which is usually found in tropical regions. According to the CDC, locally acquired cases haven't been reported in the U.S. since 2019. And the FDA has approved a new blood test to help with Alzheimer's diagnoses. The Eli Lilly and Roche test measures key proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease in people ages 55 or older. The test would be administered for patients who are showing signs of early cognitive decline. Both companies announced the test will be made directly available for the U.S. and for cheaper, since traditional tests are often costly. JPMorgan Chase says it's investing $10 billion in U.S. companies it considers important to national security. It's part of the bank's Security and Resiliency Initiative, a $1.5 trillion 10-year plan. The plan focuses on 4 areas, including defense and aerospace and energy independence and resilience. CEO Jamie Dimon says the U.S. is too reliant on unreliable sources of critical minerals. A former FBI agent convicted of rape and sentenced to decades behind bars. What prosecutors say he used to lure his victims in. And easing traffic patterns now coming with a cost. How a new city project is impacting an entire community. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America, and we start in Maryland, where a former FBI agent has been sentenced to decades in prison after being convicted of rape.
4 years ago, then FBI agent Eduardo Valdivia was caught on camera pulling his gun and shooting a panhandler on a metro train. He was charged with attempted murder, but his lawyer successfully argued self-defense, and Valdivia was acquitted. Montgomery County State's Attorney John McCarthy says he then used his freedom to commit rape.
This is one of the most dastardly, evil, schemed crimes I've seen in 40 years.
While working as an FBI agent before and after the Metro shooting, Valdivia was also secretly moonlighting as a tattoo artist and boudoir photographer under the aliases Lalo Brown and El Boogie. He was offering free tattoos and phony modeling contracts to girls lured to his after-hours studio and hotel rooms.
He just used his skills that he had honed over nearly 15 years with the FBI to allow him to manipulate for the purposes of sex these 3 young victims.
3 victims came forward, one just a high school senior at the time of the crime, and after a 2-week trial, Valdivia was convicted in July.
These railroad tracks that run through Blackstone and McKinley Avenues will soon look like this project derailing businesses in its path.
I know they want to improve the transportation on the crossroad over here, but it is our livelihood, and I would hope the city just considers the impact it has on our people.
Harmon, owner of Harmon Star Mart, says what was once a flourishing business area is now full of boarded up windows and closed signs.
We're having all of the business shut down. People are not conducting their usual business anymore. That decreases traffic, that diverts traffic to other places.
To move forward with this project, businesses in the area are facing eminent domain. Harmon's business is one of very few still open. He says it will remain that way until he reaches an agreement with the city.
It's a 2-lane road up through Provo Canyon, and then it becomes a 1-lane road when you get up near the top of Deer Creek right there. Our goal for this project is to make it 2 lanes both directions.
To do that, UDOT is actually carving 2 new lanes into the mountainside. Do you have to blast the hill?
Yes, there'll be some blasting probably, but there's going to be a lot of digging, a lot of excavating of the wall as we make our cuts into the hillside there.
According to UDOT, this scenic drive between the Rainbow Bay Day Use area and the junction with State Route 113 on US 189 in Provo Canyon carries thousands of commuters.
This is really the only route through here, unless you go all the way around to Parley's or all the way down somewhere else.
Why is this needed there?
It's been needed for a long time. We have a lot of traffic that goes on that route. It's a very highly commuted route, and to make things a lot safer too, to avoid crashes, head-on collisions, all that kind of thing, it's good to have the separated lanes.
I think if it makes it safer for everyone, that's a good thing.
Still ahead here on the National News Desk, a core battle over a sandwich involving Smucker's and Trader Joe's will fill you in. Plus, wood that's stronger than steel? The new invention scientists say could change the way buildings are constructed. Scientists have created a new kind of wood they say is 10 times stronger than steel and 6 times lighter. Superwood is being manufactured by Invent Wood, based in Maryland. It's made by chemically treating and compressing regular wood. The company tells CNN when used in buildings, it would allow for lighter structures, making them more earthquake resistant and easier to construct. Smucker's is suing Trader Joe's, alleging it copied its Uncrustables sandwiches. The product is called Crustless Peanut Butter and Strawberry Jam Sandwiches. In the lawsuit, the J.M. Smucker Company claims the product violates its product design and packaging trademarks. Smucker wants Trader Joe's to stop making its product, destroy remaining stock, and give profits from any sales to Smucker plus damages. And a ghostly image of a hyena won a South African photographer the Wildlife Photographer of the Year award. You have to come here and take a closer look at this. The image features a brown hyena. You saw it, the rarest hyena species in the world. It was one of 19 winners chosen out of a pool of over 10,000 submissions. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check our local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, we hope you have a great week.